Welcome to The Interview, where we share inspiring career stories and advice from experts and thought leaders on any and all topics, everything from college admissions tips to the latest medical and self-care advice. I'm host Leslie Heaney, and I'm excited to share these compelling stories with you. I hope you'll learn something new and hopefully share a few laughs along the way. Today on the show, I'm so very excited to spend time with Matt Sharp, founder of Sharp Entertainment, one of the most successful conglomerates in reality television. Matt's hit shows include everything from 90 Day Fiancee, which is a complete juggernaut, to Doomsday Preppers, Punkin' Chunkin', Man vs. Food. Matt has so many hit shows, it would be impossible actually to list them all. But besides being a mega hit producer and CEO, Matt is one of the finest people you'll ever meet. He's absolutely hilarious, and he has one of the most wonderful families around. So Matt's going to talk to us about how he got started, the trajectory of his career, and what a day in the life of a mega hit reality television show producer is like. I'll also mention this interview was conducted using remote microphones, so there's a bit of spotty volume at certain times. So with that, here's Matt. Okay, Matt, so Sharp Entertainment started in 2003. What was your background, or what were you doing before that?
Well, I was always a kid who was, when I came to New York City, and I was like one of these kids who was from central New York and, was constantly making videos with my buddies. And it was like, whenever a teacher gave us an assignment, it would be, you can either write a paper or you can make a video. And we're like, let me think about that. We're going to do the video. And this was the 80s. And at the time, everyone's now has like editing equipment on their phones and they can whip together a TikTok video in 10 seconds. But back in the day, I had a very savvy friend named Tom, and Tom could string together 2 VHS players with wires. And we would actually edit with VHS.
Weird science. You're like weird science.
Oh, totally weird science. Yes. Yeah. So we made videos. We made all kinds of things like, videos of us dunking. We were TikTok basically before TikTok. We were Instagram before Instagram. And we were doing all this stuff and kind of entertaining our friends and our parents. And then at the same time, I was the kid who was like extremely entrepreneurial. I was kind of like, the Sharky kid who was like in my bedroom, like, hey, you want to buy my clothes? I'll give you a good deal on that. I was the kid who went to soccer camp when I was 10 and went to the grocery store prior to soccer camp, bought a huge thing of bulk candy and sold candy at soccer camp. In high school, I had a window washing business. It was Sharp Shine. A driveway sealing business.
I forget you told me about Sharp Shine. There's another. What's the other one that has the great title?
Well, Sharp Seal was Sharp Seal. I don't know if it's as good a title, but that was the driveway sealing business. Much dirtier. What we realized when we did that, Leslie, is that very quickly I realized that Sharp Shine, when you're shining windows, that you're dealing with moms. And you're in high school and you're like, oh, Mrs. So-and-so. And she's like, can we get you a little lemonade, Matt? That would be great. When it's a driveway, it's like the gruff dad who's like, you missed a spot, kid. So anyway, I was that guy. I was also, making T-shirts in college and like selling. So I was constantly. So really, when I came to New York, I kind of thought those are my 2 things I wanted to do. Is like I was creative, I was entrepreneurial. And so, but of course, the third rail, which was, what do mom and dad want you to do? Or what do you think you're expected to do? And it's actually my first internship. My senior year was at a law firm, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. All lawyers are great, Leslie. I know.
I'm a recovering lawyer myself, but you should also mention that your parents were professors, right?
Yes.
So you have this background of having. Very...
Mom and dad, right. So dad was the longtime chairman of the history department at Syracuse University, and mom was one of the deans of Newhouse. And I grew up, as a total fac brat, like a faculty brat. And we went to literally every Syracuse basketball and football game, to all the bowl games. But their influence really was, Dad, was kind of the researcher, the historian. I love history. Mom was really the media side of it. And so, yeah, I kind of got that background. And so when I came to New York, it was, what do I do? And then ultimately, I had a couple of jobs, and then I started my company in 2003.
But before that, you were at VH1, right? Is that right?
I was, yeah. So I again, like any kid coming into New York, trying to break in, my sister was living in Pelham, New York at the time. So I crashed on her couch and I commuted to the city in a ill-fitting olive green suit, and went on job interviews. One of my first job interviews was at MTV, and that was in 1995. And at the time, 1995 MTV was like the coolest place in the world to work. And I walked in this olive green suit and a red tie, and kids were in shorts and Hawaiian shirts, skateboarding past me. And, of course, I'm like the biggest dweeb they've ever seen. And I'm like, hello, Mr. So-and-so, I'm Matt Sharp, and I would like a job here. And then I did end up getting the internship, and that's where I started. And then I worked there for a while. I was a page at CBS for a while. I was Kenneth the Page, basically.
Amazing.
And I was showing people to the bathrooms at Ed Sullivan Theater. That was the first, you never aspire to your first job out of college to wear a name tag. But I was on Broadway, seating people at Ed Sullivan Theater, which was an awesome job. And that kind of sprung me. From there, I went to CBS News. Then I went to VH1. And then ultimately from there, started my business.
So I love the choice of the olive green suit. I mean, for you, very off color, literally and figuratively. And so you roll in there and what was the point at the law office when you was there a dramatic exit like you did
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I that was actually the summer after my junior year in college. I came to New York. I got a job actually for a judge out on Long Island, a guy by the name of Kenneth Malloy, who was a very nice guy. He was in Mineola, Long Island. I reverse commuted. And he had a legal secretary at the time who was a real hard ass. And I was working with all law students. I somehow got this job through connections and was working in this. And I kind of very quickly realized when the guy said, everyone, we have 10 minutes and we're back to the books forthwith or whatever, like yelling at people. And I thought to myself, like, maybe this isn't for me. Of course, you're reverse commuting, living in New York for the first time. Every morning I'm hungover, of course, coming, out from New York to Long Island. And thinking like I'm going against the traffic, I'm heading in the wrong direction. And so I'm like, Mom, Dad, give me 6 months to try TV and see what happens.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. So like, here you go. You've got Sharp Shine, you've got Sharp Seal, and that entrepreneurial, spirit is very alive and well. And you decide in 2003 to go out on your own and start Sharp Entertainment. That's that's a big move. Like it
was a big move. Yeah. So that was a big year, 2003. My wife, Martha, who we were married in 2001. And then, I kind of started looking down the pipeline. I was raised in a family because my parents are academics where we really I'm kind of different from them because neither of my parents were entrepreneurial, but I was not raised in a family where they're like, how are you going to make money and how are you going to do this and money was never mentioned in my family. So I kind of came to New York and blissfully kind of, going about my life thinking like, this is great. I'll just get my paychecks here. And all of a sudden when Martha and I got married in 2001, I thought, oh my gosh, if we have kids, I got to kind of figure this out and kind of really, push myself. And so I created some shows internally at VH1 at the time. And we wanted to do a show. And the idea was, wouldn't it be fun to kind of bring back and do our own version of Lifestyles and the Rich and Famous, which if you remember, Lifestyles Rich and Famous is a very cheesy 80s show where Robin Leach with his British accent would bring you through Lifestyles and Rich and Famous. And so we started developing that concept. And I think at the time there was a downturn in the economy and the research comes back and says, actually, when the downturn in the economy, people kind of want to see this escapist programming like a Lifestyles Rich and Famous. So this show was The Fabulous Life. We developed this. The first show we developed was The Fabulous Life of Jennifer Lopez.
Wait, did you do who does that research? Were you doing that research before you pitched it, or you just decided this would be a great idea, and then you wanted to see if the market, if it would,
So I was working internally at the time. So that was before I started my company.
Right.
And I was working internally at VH1. And so it was, here's a nugget of an idea. Let us run with it. And the people that worked for me within VH1, we all got together and we put together a binder, and we thought, like, who's the best person at that time? And again, this is 2002. Who's the best person? And this was like Jennifer Lopez heyday. Jennifer Lopez was the biggest star in the world. And we're like, no doubt, it's Jennifer Lopez. So we put together the research, and then we got a pilot, and we said, let's do this pilot. And we had a couple of things.
So they gave you the funding. Sorry, VH1 VH1 gives you the funding for the pilot.
Yes. Yeah. So VH1, when, either way in these scenarios, you're getting the funding from the network, but VH1, was working internally, and we budgeted the show out and said, we're going to do a pilot. The funny thing about that is that at the time, and this is really before a time of Us Weekly and In Touch and definitely TMZ, where, we're kind of like a new era of celebrity where they're so used to getting poked and prodded and looked at and whatever else. This was a show that was before that, where really dealing with a celebrity, it was basically authorized. Like, you'd go to their team, and if they said, we don't want you to talk about us, you said, okay, we're not going to talk about you. This was an unauthorized show where we did all this research about Jennifer Lopez, we put it all together, and then it aired.
So you didn't get her. You didn't go to her first to ask her.
That was actually no. Like at the time, this was one of the first. I mean, there are other unauthorized shows, but this was really, that was like a down and dirty, cheap cable show where, like, we're gonna take a lot of clips. It's a clip show, right? Like, that exists prior, and we're gonna do a show about J-Lo, and it's gonna be all about her money and where she lives and where she eats and where she goes to travel. And this aired. And it became a huge hit. Like, it was like, what we call a backdoor pilot, which is, it's a pilot of television that's not promoted or anything like that. They just kind of throw it on the air, and you hope it rates. And if it rates, there's potentially you might do a series from that. So we put it on the air. It became a huge hit. And then a week later, we got a call. VH1 got a call from J-Lo's management and said, what the F are you doing? You got to take that off the air. It's like, this is really invasive. And so we kind of met with.
What was featured? Were you like, here's her Miami house? This is.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, we obviously you don't give away people's addresses, but it's like, here's where she ate, and we did a thing at Mr. Chow, like when when you interview the maitre d' there, and it says when J-Lo comes in, she likes getting this and that, and she stays at this hotel and she loves it, and she likes her her room just so, and
she only wants General Tso's. She only wants General Tso's.
Exactly. She loves the General Tso's. She loves it. Exactly. So we did the show. Huge hit. We get a call. Her manager, a guy by the name of Benny Medina, calls up, and he's a very powerful guy.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar. Not that I don't know much.
Oh yeah, Benny Medina is like a big guy. And I'm some peon working over at VH1 who's just put together the show, and he's like furious. And J-Lo's seen it, and she's furious. We work with them, and like actually a guy at VH1 who's a very smart guy who ran it named Michael Hirschhorn worked with that and said basically like lay out like all of your concerns. We'll go through and address those. And we did. But the interesting thing about this, Leslie, is that, that was the first reaction, right? Again, it's before In Touch. It's before Us Weekly. It's before TMZ. Celebrities weren't used to that. A year later, when we actually were doing that show and working really hard and pushing, and doing lots of different episodes of other celebrities, we got another call back from J-Lo's camp, and they said, are you interested in doing a J-Lo 2? So the ground had shifted in just a year where, went from, oh my God, I don't want people talking about me like this to, oh, this is actually good, right? This is good for my brand and who I am or whatever else. So anyway, back to the idea of starting the company. So that show became a big hit. And from there, I was always, as I said, entrepreneurial and interested in starting businesses. And I walked into my bosses at VH1 and said, what I really would love to do. I was getting job offers out in Los Angeles and other places. And I said, what I really want to do is stay in New York and start a business. And I credit, again, the same guy, Michael Hirschhorn, who's a great friend and supporter. And he said, well, that sounds great. Why don't you go start a company? Well, you can produce the Fabulous Life as a third party, through your own production company. And so we kind of worked out the details. I had my Jerry Maguire moment, at VH1 where, I'm like, who's coming with me? Anyone coming with me to Sharp Entertainment? It's a new company down the street. Who wants to leave the cushy offices? So I, recruited some people. They came with me. And then we were literally building edit rooms around editors, like building a space while we're, making shows or whatever. So that was 2003.
But how did that? So by the way, that's your friend and mentor and boss at the time, Michael Hirschhorn. I mean, what a gem he is, because I could see a big network like that wanting to get into it with you about who actually owns.
Right. Well, they own it. They own it. But I think Michael at the time was thinking, right, maybe we could actually here's what we're spending on internally. If Matt can produce these for that same number or less externally and get rid of all the headaches that come with, doing a production internally and all of that stuff, that's probably a win for them. And I, at that point, I proved this show was a hit. I proved myself as an executive producer that we could deliver these shows. But anyway, it was a leap of faith on his end. And I won't say that the first year or two, there weren't some bumpy moments, including some tears and calling the ambulance on my part. But that's, I think anyone that starts a business has that moment.
But how about, did you, you had to build the boxes for your editors. You had to go have a place to go. You had to take your, Jerry Maguire group with you. Did you have friends and family investors? Did VH1 help with that, with sort of bridging the gap by saying, we're going to do a production deal with you for Fabulous Life to give you the runway that you needed? How did you structure all of that?
When I started the company, it was not, I had no investors. I was not maxing out credit cards. And that was the very lucky part about having a committed series, right? Like I was able to say, I forget the original order of the Fabulous Life, but I think it was 18 episodes where the network said, okay, here's your budget for 18 episodes. And that's the money we had to rent a space and, start building edit rooms. And of course, there's a leap of faith, get the edit machines. One of the early decisions I made was, will we rent edit machines or buy them? And renting them would have been, really expensive and cut into profit margins and everything else. And you're giving a lot to a rental company to rent them. But if you buy them, you own them, but you own them. They're expensive and you got to pay them off. And we said, what, we have enough faith in ourselves, at least next couple of years, we're going to buy them. And then, I think we've eventually retired those, but yeah, we went through them. It was a good choice.
So after you have the Fabulous Life, which is was one of my favorite shows, by the way.
Oh, good.
And that doesn't mean that there isn't enough time to bring it back. I feel like there's a lot of new Fabulous Lives out there that you could.
Oh, we've talked to many people. I've redeveloped that show. We actually almost brought it back with MTV a year ago. We had a whole thing with them. Yes, I know. It'll eventually be back.
I was going to say, keep it in circulation because it's an oldie but goodie. If Night Court can come back,
oh my God.
Definitely.
We love
need
it.
a Fabulous Life. But beyond that, so how do you, you have so many incredibly successful, just exciting, incredible shows that people want to watch. How do you come up with your ideas? What's your process? Tell us how I'm sure you've got probably a creative team that maybe pitches you ideas at this point and comes to you, but tell me where you.
Yes. So
about the brilliance.
Thank you. We've got a great development team. that within the company that's their job, right? Like they're coming up at all times. They are looking at the world and coming up with ideas and pitching each other and monitoring what's on, other networks and other streaming services, looking at, what's tracking in the news, what people are talking about, and then ultimately looking at the marketplace and saying, what are people looking for right now? What's working? And is there an opportunity for us, to kind of figure out, something in a space that's working or a completely new space, to go pitch that show. Our development process is, really focused on, we want to make shows that work and that people really talk about and that's what drives a business. And that's kind of what's fun about being in this business is when it's fun to have a show. It's fun to produce a show. It's fun to put a show on television. But what's really fun is that when people that you're not forcing to watch. My mom and dad were great. Like every show I ever watched, they were right there watching. No matter what, they were there watching it on television. But other people that you're not forcing to watch are really watching, enjoying, and talking about it. And that's what's really fun. So our development process is focused on we want hits, we want long sustaining hits. And move the needle in our industry to do cool new things that, bring us into different genres and just kind of, think about, what's the next thing for the space.
So you talked about when you were at VH1 that you all did that research to sort of see that, people were, kind of down or the economy was down and they wanted to see Fabulous Lives.
Yeah.
Is there when your development team does that research, is there a go-to agency for that? How do you come up with your research to know what's trending, or is it more just their observations and what they're seeing and they're actually creating those conclusions? They're the ones who are saying, here, I think people are interested in this, or this is what's happening now. And I'm sure coming out of COVID, maybe.
Yeah. So it's all internal. So there's not an agency we go to. And there's a lot of gut stuff. Like we'll kind of come up with, what's out there. Like for a show like The Fabulous Life, that was, researchers on those teams that we said, tell us everything there is to know about Justin Timberlake. And, there'd be these incredible binders we would go through and be like, wow, that's a lot of media about Justin Timberlake. I never knew, all this stuff. In terms of the new shows and new ideas, we'll come up with a notion and then dig in a little. One example of kind of how research potentially works is when we did a show called Extreme Couponing, and I don't have the year right handy, but it's a number of years ago that became a big #1 hit on TLC, and if you haven't seen it, Extreme Couponing is it's a show that follows real people that are really good at couponing, right? Like insanely good at couponing. They can go into a grocery store because they know what they're doing and they use coupons they've gotten out of their papers or online or whatever else, and they put these together and they can walk out of a store with $1,000, sometimes $2,000 worth of free groceries, or like, hey, pay us $20 for $1,000 worth of groceries. So the way that came up, that came to be, is at the time there was a big trend in television that were really working these found money shows. Like a found money show would be something like a Pawn Stars or a Pickers, where people are like, it's found money, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this thing's been collecting dust in my attic, and I brought it down to someone who kind of knew what they were talking about, and this is worth $2,200. That's found money. Or Pickers, this is over here, found money. But both those shows were very male. And, they were male skewing. They were on History Channel. If you look at the numbers,
That's so interesting. The research shows that those are male skewed shows, because I just got hot and bothered when you're talking, like, what, I was thinking about that at this thing in my head.
Yes.
Like, it's so interesting.
So yes, those I think probably the audiences for those shows are 70% male. So at the time we were thinking, okay, so as a production company who's looking to make shows, what's the opportunity? We could go and pitch another a male facing found money show, or we were thinking like, what would be kind of a cool, zag going to a female network. And the idea was we kind of looked at a couple spaces, then we saw videos of these people that were doing this couponing, which was like, it's like a magic trick. You see people, you're like, I cannot believe they just did that. So that was really, for us, it was like, oh, this could be a found money show for us. Let's go dig into this world. And we thought like maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 people out there, maybe that can't sustain a series. And what we learned was it was an ocean of people who were out there who were like riveted by couponing, who were really good at this. And that sustained, season after season. And when that show aired, it was, people like that was something that people really focus on because it's a compelling notion to think like, wait, if I know what I'm doing, I have the know-how, there's $1,000 in my Sunday paper. It's just sitting there. Like,
by the way, again, as you're discussing this, I'm thinking how I always throw the coupons out. I'm like, maybe
exactly. Right. Yeah. If you know what you're doing.
Get my acting.
The term extreme couponing became it might have been the number 1 search term in the world on Google after that special, the first special aired. It was like, people were like, wait, what? Like, how do I do this?
But is that, so you took the found money, like the success of the found money show that had been, kind of seemed like it had been captivating a male audience. And then through the couponing, was that, I'm assuming like that was more women?
Much more female, and that aired on TLC, which is a female skewing network.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to look for I haven't checked my mailbox in 3 days. I know I'm going to have some fines in there when I get home later. But so the pitch process, so you get this idea, right? You've like discovered this, let's take, the couponing example. And your team thinks it's a great idea. You all kind of do the research that you think. What's the next that you think makes sense to figure out whether or not it's a smart thing to move forward with? And then what do you do? What's the next step?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's like, that's an art, not a science for sure. Yeah. Again, we're at the I think at the place in the company and the size of our company and the amount of projects we have, we really are evaluating a lot of what we think are really good ideas. And, they're coming from the development department. They're coming from, a lot of times I'll be, at a dinner with friends and we're kind of talking about a topic and something pops into my head. I'm like, I just kind of jot it down on my phone, like, or going running, those ideas pop in. So it's like, so you've got all these ideas and then you're kind of saying like, right, which ones do we feel like are really great? Then, everything else goes out, like which ones are really great that are producible. Then it's, which ones we believe are saleable. That's totally different, right? Like, because networks, you could have the world's greatest idea, but if there's not the distributor for that idea, a network or a streamer, it doesn't matter. Like, you could walk in with like the next, American Idol, but like if they don't do dance shows, doesn't matter. Yeah. Or sorry, singing shows, doesn't matter. So, and then, lastly, right, like, is there actually a place for these ideas? So we evaluate that. And then we're figuring out from, our relationships and everything else, what's the best way to pitch an idea? Sometimes it's like, it's just a short circuit. It's, I've got a lot of relationships at networks now where just through all the shows we've done and, we've been around for a while. So I'll pick up the phone and call the head of the network and say, here's a one line. I believe this is a hit for you guys. And we've sold series like that. So that's the best way. That's the shortest way. And then there's we have an entire deck. We've put together a reel. We've cast it. We've invested a lot of money in this. We have a polished pitch and we bring that out and and then we go around to various networks we believe that show's good for. And we're pitching it that way.
Is one more successful than the other, just in your own experience? Do you feel like if you have the one that sometimes if you're able to do the one line, do those do those often, move forward more than the ones that require more kind of pitching or selling or background information, or is it sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I think our most successful shows are the ones that we've been most passionate about, and so either of those scenarios, ideas fall into those things, but a great example of that is 90 Day Fiancé.
Yep.
Which is, one of our shows and continues to be a big hit. That was a show that we developed originally in 2011 based on a news magazine piece that someone was watching for development and said, "Oh my God, I saw this news magazine piece." It was, Americans going abroad actually to Odessa, Ukraine, which has unfortunately been in the news recently for other reasons.
Yeah.
And Americans are going over on these love tours, and they're meeting women they've met online, and they are falling in love. A lot of these guys are going with engagement rings. We thought this was a great space. And we developed this show, and we're like, this is a hit. We love it. It's amazing. We put together all the stuff. We actually talked to the company that's doing these tours, and we had some casting. We walked out, and we're like, this is the best idea. And we were resoundingly told this is a terrible idea. We got rejected by everyone. So that was like, okay, well, we put that back in the shelf, and what do you do? But I'm a believer, and all of our biggest shows have been ones that we really believed in and just pushed through. And so we're like, we're going to redevelop this. It's not for women. We're going to do it for men. And we're going to call it, at the time, Spike was a channel, which was like a guy network.
Oh, yeah.
Spike. And so we're like, you know what? It's not going to be called, I forget the name of it. It wasn't called 90 Day Fiancé, but it was like 90 Days to Wed or something. That was, so we're like, we're going to make it a guy facing show, and we're going to call it Love Wars Russia, or something like that, or Bachelor Wars Russia. And that's going to be like, and so we walked all the male networks. We're like, no, guys are going to love watching the show. It's like a bunch of guys going over, and they're going to they're going to the, Europe, and they're looking for love, and and of course they said, you're crazy. We're rejecting you. We don't like you. Don't call us. And then I think we developed it one more time, and I was basically done. I'm like, okay, it was like over a 2-year period. We had pitched that show. And then I was at a television conference in Washington, D.C. in 2013, and I was having a meeting with a friend in the industry who's now the president of TLC and the president of Discovery, a guy by the name of Howard Lee. And, like any good executive, he said, okay, we had a conversation. He's like, you know what, Matt, I just want to hear from you. I want to hear what shows you're really passionate about. I don't care if we've passed on it, because, I don't care if, anyone's passed on it. I don't care if you don't think it's right for us. What's the show you think is a hit that, and I'm like, wasn't even planning on pitching it. And so I took a reel out of my bag. I'm like, oh, this is a hit. And I stuck it in the computer, and he watched it.
Wait, 1 second. So you did do some filming. It wasn't just pitch.
Well, we put together. Yes, thank you for asking. We did a rip reel, what they call a rip reel, which was we actually didn't film it, but it was from another show that we had done that had kind of similar notes. We cut it together and made it look like that. So I took that out. I played that for him, and it ended. He took his headphones off, and he says, "I'm buying that."
So amazing. And by the way, I mean, he must be just high-fiving you every time he sees you, because
we're great friends. It's really fun, as you know, to share success with someone. We've shared a lot of success. He was actually the guy who commissioned Extreme Couponing, and we've both, it's both, 90 days, both being great for both of us. And, we talk every week still, and we do a lot for those guys. So yeah, no, it's been awesome. Great partnership.
So speaking of 90 Day Fiancé, which I love, and everyone I know who's seen it loves, it's great TV. It's great TV. And I think it's great TV because of the human, you're really getting involved in people's lives, right? And it's real drama, dealing with people's love lives. I mean, how do you go about, I mean, you mentioned that you contacted the dating service or the service that placed, American men with women, from the Eastern Bloc or Ukraine or wherever they were going to find these fiancés or these brides. How do you all come up with the casting for it now or in the past for 90 Day Fiancé? How do you find these very, very diverse couples? I mean, not everyone's from the same area.
Yeah. So originally, yes. So originally we, in the development process, we kind of reached out to that company and said, oh, do you have casting? And we actually ultimately didn't move forward with that company. But that was a real challenge. I mean, because we actually just sold this concept based on a kind of a bullshit reel that we had put together from another show, and like, hey, look, here's what it looks like, and then you bring it over to production development. That's always a fun moment when development's sold something that's basically unproducible and hands it to the production people in my company, like, here's the show, and they're like, really? Like, how the hell are we ever going to produce this? And so that was a real challenge. I mean, it was like, how are we going to figure out, because we want this to be totally organic and authentic. And as you know, this is not a show where we're putting couples together. And it's not like, this is not, The Bachelor, where everyone's in a house. It's truly a documentary. We're following real couples that have already found each other, and we're going to, and they all are similar in that one's an American, one's a foreigner, and in 90 Day, they're going for a K-1 visa, which is the marriage visa. We're following that process, but we wanted to be super organic. So our original idea was, we're going to reach out to immigration lawyers from around the country and just say, hey, we're doing this show. We're doing an authentic take. We want to follow the lives of, an American or foreigner who fall in love. They're going through this process. If you've got anyone in your practice who's a client that's interested, let us know. But we have an incredible casting departments. They contacted all of this huge network of lawyers. And then we got back, in the beginning, it's like, they don't know who you are. The show doesn't exist yet. So it's always like, what's this thing? What's this show? When a show becomes in its second season, you're getting you get a flood of emails. But in the beginning, right, people are like really suspicious and they don't know what it is. But we kind of got a trickling in of some casting and a little more. And I think in the original season only 6 episodes, and we had 4 couples. So, and we got some good couples. I mean, we had some great couples in that season, but yeah, like in the beginning, it was like,
how do you
find these people?
Well, and also, how do you tempt them to, do they get paid for participating, or are they just excited about being?
So the American receives in 90 Day, like a nominal fee. We never wanted, and the foreigner, because they're a foreigner and they can't work, they don't receive money.
Okay.
So there's no money for the foreigner, but we didn't, when you're doing a show that you want to be as authentic as possible, what you don't want is, someone in that show, like that becomes their job. Like you don't want the show to become their job, because all of a sudden it's like, wait, that's not authentic. They were working down at the bank, last week, or they're working at a construction site or whatever else. And all of a sudden, like, no, I'm getting the checks from the production company, so I don't need to work. So it's like, it's a delicate balance. You want to like compensate people for their time, but at the same time, you want this to be super authentic, and like people need to retain their real lives.
Yeah. I was just thinking, the reason why I asked that was because I often think, like, I rewatched an episode the other night, knowing you and I were going to talk today, and I was thinking, like, they're really putting themselves out there. I mean, it's a lot of personal stuff that they're sharing. Yes. I'm like, are they just, hopefully someone's getting like, a gift certificate to Outback Steakhouse or something's happening for them to really want to, let it all hang out. But I think sometimes people want to share their their stories, right? So maybe it's not. I mean, obviously with like American Idol or any home show, they're not compensated. But I was really thinking that, sort of wondering about that piece. And I want to talk to you too about that, because I know one of your other hit shows, Man vs. Food, that show had a star. Like you mentioned, you don't want to keep the authenticity. Tell us about that show, and how does that work when you have a reality TV star, right? You don't have kind of an ensemble cast. You're not switching it up, but you kind of, because that person had a specific talent, right? I mean, that guy could eat, a lot of food.
That's a different type of show, right? So we do lots of shows, and actually through the course of my career, it's funny, every couple of years, based on what show you have that's a real hit, people view you differently. So for a while, we were the Fabulous Life guys. Then we were the extreme couponing guys, the Doomsday Prepper guys, and those kind of different. And then we became the love guys. I'm all about love. But in terms of Man versus Food, like the concept behind that was, there were a lot of food travel logs at the time. Not a lot, but we were kind of the beginning of that trend where, obviously Anthony Bourdain had a great show. Then there was Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Yeah. Which became a big show. And so our concept was, again, going back to the development space, it's like, okay, how can we take one of these things and give it like an extra flair, or like give it kind of like, how can we bring it over the top? And so Man vs. Food was like, we need to find a great host. And if we find a great host and they go to all the best kind of mom and pop places around the country, and they travel and they're really good and they impart information, and the angle will be, these are kind of like the best greasy spoons, the places that you'll drive 15 minutes off the interstate to go find down a dirt road you've heard about to eat at. And that will be at least be a double, and then once you get the double, meaning like, we think that'll be a good show, but maybe not a hit. And then the concept is, what if every place the guy did an eating challenge. So we're like, okay, let's cast that. And the original casting was in New York at Katz's Deli. And we had like a big casting call for that. And we had lots of different people, a lot former NFL guys were showing up, and professional eaters were showing up. And,
wait, hold that thought. I want to get back to what a professional eater is, but keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So they're all in there, and and professional eaters. The one thing about professional eaters is that it's not appetizing to watch them eat. So maybe some people find it Joey Chestnut fun to watch. Eat hot dogs. I don't particularly want to eat after watching Joey Chestnut eat. Yeah. So we're kind of like, that's also this is someone who loves food, enjoys food. So we did the NFL guys, and then this guy walked into Katz's, who I think his manager basically begged him on to the audition because he didn't have this type of experience. He wasn't like a football player. We kind of thought maybe we'll get a big name or whatever. And this guy came in, and if he get a Katz's Deli t-shirt on, and his name is Adam Richman.
I was going to say, what was his name? Adam or Brandon? It was Adam. Yeah,
Adam Richman. And he came in, and like an audition I've never seen, right? Like, he nailed it. He absolutely crushed it. Like he knew everything about Katz's. His energy was perfect. The people at Katz's, by the time he was done the audition, everyone was in love with this guy. Not only the crew, but the people that worked at Katz's. What makes a great host is not only charm. You're funny. You're attractive. People want to be with But really, what makes a great host is two things. One, you're smart, and you prepare. And Adam is both those things. He's like really smart, and he really prepares. And so he came in like knowing everything about everything, and nailed that audition. It was just throwing out like brainer, like, this is our guy.
Because he's like, this is one kind of corned beef. How long did you marry? Did he know all? I mean, he must have been
he knew that. He knew the history of Katz's. He knew the little old lady behind the counter, her story. Like, that's how you become a great host. You actually engage with people, and you like really, and it's amazing. And if someone's not prepared, I really believe that America's got like a hidden kind of detector in everyone's chest. That if someone's full of shit or they're not authentic, people, they might not outwardly realize that's the case, but at the end of the day, they're just not engaged by the material. Like they'll if someone's really engaged and they're like really telling you something or whatever, like you'll lean in as an audience member. It's Adam, like you listen to him talk and you just lean in because he's got like a joy, he's got a passion. So he was awesome. And then that show became we launched the first episode and that became the #1 show on Travel Channel of all time.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing show. Is there, out of all the shows, I mean, we haven't really even covered Doomsday Prepper, which is another amazing show. Punkin' Chunkin',
I know
which
you guys are preppers.
What's that?
I know you guys are preppers.
Well, as you do, I had an inflatable raft in my closet in our apartment for 10 years.
That might have been a little tough taking across the East River, but
we never really wanted to think about the East River currents. It was more just having it for show that we had more soup cans than you. And I told you the story where when I was working in my law office, my husband Andrew bought me this. There was this Israeli spy store like on 2nd or 3rd Avenue that sold the bags. This is like a couple of years after 9/11. And it had like a zip up suit with the mask. Yeah. And I brought it to my law office and everyone's having lunch in the conference room, the partners. And I thought it'd be funny to put it on with the gas mask cartridge and go into the conference room. And so I went home and I told my husband the story and he's like, how could you tell them you had it there? I can't believe they know you have it. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, they're my friends. I just showed, I brought this. Exactly. I'm working in Carnegie Hall Tower that someone's going to, he's like, no one's your friend when a dirty bomb goes off. And
exactly. And the end of days comes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you get that, you get the full view there. But that was another show. And that probably honestly was just like all your other shows that you've pointed out, having a context with what's going on, in society, really, right? That is sort of after 9/11 and the years following that, crazy people, like us had
and that was like, right. If you look at like our shows, Extreme Couponers, that's a subculture, right? And the same thing with Doomsday Preppers, that's a real subculture that we originally did a special and we thought like, oh, there'll be 2 or 3 people out there that are doing this and this will be an interesting special. And, of course you unearth and you kind of peel back the onion and you realize that it's an entire world of people. The interesting thing about that show is I think originally we developed that show as really a pure subculture show. Like, look, these people exist. Isn't that interesting? Right? Like that's kind of like a subculture show is like, here are people in America that exist. We're going to tell really interesting stories about these people that are interesting. And I think probably our first impression was people were going to watch it like that, right? They were going to watch it like, wow, that's crazy. Honey, get in here. Look at this guy. He turned his entire pool in his backyard to a tilapia fishing pond, so they can eat tilapia out of their pool. Like what the research came back from that show, and people weren't watching it like that. They weren't watching it like, oh my God. I mean, some people were. But most people were watching that show with a pen and notepad. They were taking notes in that show. They were like, there was like real takeaway, just like probably you and Andrew were sitting there, on the edge of your couch, taking notes and trying to figure out what your next move is. That's of course, the only person that didn't listen to that show is me, because when Hurricane Sandy rolled through town, I was the last guy at CVS desperately trying to buy batteries. I'm like, wait, I'm the executive producer of Doomsday Preppers and I'm not prepared.
And I only have one flashlight with no battery.
Exactly. Yes. That's me.
Well, the thing is too, as one of the problems with having my closet was that all of our dear friends like you knew about the closet. So at some point, if things really went south, we would have a lot of people.
Right. I think people say that like you can be totally prepared, but the guy with the gun basically owns it all. It's kind of like, okay, we know the Heaney's have stuff.
We also had a backpack with like $2,000 in cash and a steak knife. I mean, it was just, I don't know what the thought was in there, just in case things really went south. But so when you started and you were doing your pitching, you were dealing with cable TV, streaming was not a thing. How was that transition for you? And I guess the industry in general was probably kind of like, gosh, this is a new thing. And is that going to change my format? Is that going to change my audiences for my different shows or other shows ideas that I have for shows? What was your thinking around that? And how did you kind of begin to just adapt to that new opportunity?
Sure. Yeah. So we have, I guess we view our company as we're content makers, and the distribution platforms are going to change. But as long as we're, making great content, telling great stories, we can sell or bring shows to anyone. So if it's a cable channel, a linear cable channel, if it's a streamer, if it's a website, we've pitched, brands before, kind of go directly to, through brands funding shows. So all those places, but we are content creators that, we make shows soup to nuts, right? We come with an idea, people say yes, and then ultimately we have all the means of production. And that's, we've got the edit rooms, we've got the producers, we've got everyone. And we ultimately just say, here's your show at the end of that process. And so for us, it's absolutely, there's disruption in the industry for sure. And that changes a lot of things, but just as a bare starting place, things are the same, right? It's like we're still doing the same thing. It's just potentially, it's going to sell to a different person. In terms of disruption, of course, shows with ads wrapped around them are different than shows that don't have ads wrapped around them.
Yeah.
A subscription-based streamer, their model is different on buying needs than a linear cable network that needs to have everything wrapped around ads. So those are different. Certainly different platforms. There are different lengths of shows. We've done shows for Snapchat, much shorter formats. So listen, I think there's going to be continued disruption. I think, certainly the linear cable network is, right now showing, it's kind of flattened, there's the declines aren't that big, but it's continuing to go down a little. It's like Americans, I think, your kids just like mine, I have a show, I have some shows, on networks right now that my kids, they don't watch TV, so they're like, that's great, Dad. They're not aware of the show. So I think that's a big generational shift. What are the people that, our children, teens, are they watching shows, what types of shows they're watching? And I think that's really interesting. But I think in terms of the platforms themselves, there are lots of different buyers, and obviously the streaming services flooded the market. And so there are more places to sell than ever. And content overall, I'm massively bullish about content overall. If you look at content kind of just globally, across all the platforms, it continues to skyrocket.
But this is my opinion, obviously, as a viewer. It's just interesting to see what some streaming services purchase, and the content isn't always, high, right? But I guess they have to provide a lot of quantity. You're talking
about, you mean high by premium?
Yeah, no, just meaning that some, if you look at, I'm not going to name any particular streaming service, but they'll have 10 new shows. And as someone who, lives in the boonies and occasionally likes to watch a new show, not all of them are great shows. I don't know how but I think they're looking for content that's more scripted content,
Listen, definitely a big phenomenon for a lot of people, including people that work in television. You see, and I'm a guy who's going into networks and streaming services all day and pitching them what I believe is a genius show. And I'm like, wait, that's what they picked up? That's what they're airing? I get that. I mean, like, listen, I understand that. And, I think a lot of people feel that way. And sometimes I'm sure they're looking at our shows and saying, wait, that's what they're picking up?
Yeah, never
But,
possible.
But okay, thank you. Thank you. But yes, I mean, listen, I think, continue to produce.
Do you think you did talk about our kids' generation. What do you think is the future of television? Meaning, like, is it shorter shows? Is it because a lot of our kids, they are on Snap or they're TikTok, or I don't even know all the stuff that they're on, but it's a lot of shorter kind of burst, content.
You might want to look into that, Leslie.
Right. Oh, please.
I was thinking about you know what they're on. I'm like, you might want to look into that.
I have no idea. As my friend Mike says, my house is where you watch Porky's for the first time. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they're watching.
Oh my God, Jess, put it on the list. That's hilarious. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And they're like, wait, you have Porky's at your house? I'm like, I don't know. We don't have Porky's at our house, but it's just the idea.
You're watching it on VHS, like an old, worn out VHS tape.
You do know that we do have that in our basement, and we have that just in case the internet goes out. I've got all the DVDs, the DVD players, and some good old VHS tapes just in case.
Oh my God. Laser
I'd love
discs.
to see your friend Tom's, like his weird science, his electric wire connection on the 2 VHS tapes is.
I know. Weird. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
you're asking me about the future.
Yeah. What do you,
yeah. What's that?
I said, yeah. What are your, I mean, obviously, no one can predict the future, but
I don't think people know. I mean, obviously you look at you look at trends and, streaming is up and on-demand television is up. Continues to rise. I think, we're looking at that industry now as, okay, there's so many streaming channels. You hear that all the time, right? Like when Netflix first came out, you had a captive audience of people that had Netflix. And so every time you talk to a friend, you were all watching the same thing. You'd be like, oh my God, you had a shared experience because everyone was watching that show. And now there's not a lot of cross sections with people that you're having a conversation to say like, oh, I'm watching this. Oh, I'm watching this. What are you watching? I'm watching this. Like, it's just like, there's a lot of misses there. So obviously there's a ton of content.
There's less water cooler, talk.
There's less water cooler. It's very hard. It's very hard. And so the question is just, so we have so many streaming services, it becomes kind of like cable again. You can't have them all. And then you're missing this show and that show. So are we heading back to kind of cable again? I think the bigger question is how does the younger generation consume content and what that content's going to be? Right. Certainly if you look at movie theaters right now, I mean, they're still, I looked at the numbers the other day, they're at 1995 levels today. So it grew, and then it started to dip in like 2017 before the pandemic. And obviously the pandemic, it fell off a cliff. And now we're kind of back up to 1995 levels of movie theater, and that's gross sales. And I think the tickets are probably 3 times the cost. So people aren't going to the movies. And so the question is, is there an attention span where people stop and they don't want to watch a half hour of television or an hour of television because content is so captivating on their phone, or what does that look like? I think in the short, there's like the kind of short and medium term. I think the short and medium term, I think the streamers will continue to work. I think cable will probably continue to decline, but slowly. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, there is an experience where you're watching a piece of content that's not 5 seconds long or 13 seconds long, that you're being told a story, and people love to hear a story, and that's probably in people's homes. But, and I think kids will continue to do that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like going back to the days of they're going on cable television and saying, oh, my favorite show's at 7:00 on this particular network, that's dead.
What about for Sharp Entertainment? Where do you see your company headed?
Well, certainly we look at it as, we have a core business, and our core business is, right now it's mostly linear, nonfiction programs. So, we want to keep building that business and growing that business. I think we can. Like, we've got, a couple of big hits right now, which we're excited about. And we look to kind of grow that. And I don't know if like 90 Day Fiancé, and it's got a number of spin-offs, which we produce all of those. So, not just 90 Day Fiancé, but before the 90 days, and 90 Day the Other Way, and Happily Ever After, and The Single Life. So that show, continues to do very well. And we want to, and when you're looking at a show like that, you want to say, we don't want to sit back on our laurels and think, okay, that show's a hit. People like watching that show, so we're going to kind of move our attention away from it. But how do you, year after year, come up with what else can we do in the show to be surprising and give people a new experience and tell different stories? And that's, we constantly sit around and do that. So we're kind of looking at our current business and saying, how do we sustain this and make it better and grow it? And then outside of that, we're really interested in white space areas, and what I mean by that is, what are those adjacent worlds that we're not entirely in yet? But we want to, we have never done we've done scripted-esque shows. We've never done a full scripted show. And we have a couple projects that have come close, very close actually, and then kind of got sunk by the pandemic. But I would love to do that. And, when I go to bed at night and I pick up a book, it's always history. I'm just like a nonfiction history guy. That's what I love to read. I'm, super interested in biography and history, and a lot of times probably driving my development department a little crazy, it's usually a lot of the ideas are coming like, here's the last book I read, and here's the great scripted show we could do with this book. That's really interesting to me. And I think that would be a creative challenge. But a lot of fun, and I would love to do that. Then there are other, I think, concepts that are, just going back to the question of where content's going. There was an idea that came out kind of the beginning of Amazon, and people talked about it was called the long tail, and I think there was a book called The Long Tail. And the long tail was the concept where it was no longer the big hits, right? It was no longer the Michael Crichton novels, the John Grisham novels that was driving Amazon. Those were making millions, but it was actually this just incredible long tail, right, of all these titles that you've never heard of that were selling 10,000 books or 5,000 books, but there were so many of them that drove the majority of Amazon's business. And I'm looking, and we talked about, the must-see, the kind of, the water cooler shows. We see that less and less because there's so much content. Yeah. And people are, segmented, and they really kind of want, and as technology has changed, is there a show about, people that are really interested in a very specific topic? Obviously, Doomsday Preppers is probably not a show that could have been produced, 20 years ago. People would be like, this is weird. But but I think there are going to be shows that really laser focus at, what particular audiences. It might be an audience of 10,000 people, but that 10,000 people is extremely passionate and committed to this topic, and so what does that business look like? For us, if that's a one-off show, that doesn't, making a show for 10,000 people doesn't work. But I think that's a world that we're interested in, saying how would you access those audiences ultimately, very low price point content, but for much smaller groups of people, but that are extremely interested in a particular topic.
Would that be looking at certain streaming services that are tailored to those topics, the Christian Network or the I don't even know if there is one.
No, right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, listen, I think there's verticals, right? I think the verticals
one
yes. I think verticals, and we see this, right? Verticals in everywhere in our lives, verticals are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. right? Like it's just, it used to be, when they invented television, the heyday, like the 1940s, the 50s, where it's like there were 3 networks and, each show was getting 50 million viewers. That became like a big, like that one particular show everyone was watching, and that doesn't happen anymore, right? Like no one with Super Bowl is like one thing. And so I think we're looking at the future of content. It's just more segmented. It's more, it's broken up. And so I think that, ultimately is going to continue. You see this on social media and in Facebook and everything else. Everyone's in their own lane. I think that's going to be happening more and more.
That's going to have a larger sort of impact on our society and our culture, right? If people, yes. Part of having that, go as far as being an American, but you have those shared experiences, right? Yes. Everyone's watching Cheers, and you can all get together and have that common
exactly. Yes.
Find that common thing funny, right? Or you can shift, cultural norms, and by having a show like Modern Family, or you can really just that's one thing where you don't have everybody having that same exposure to certain content is going to have an interesting impact on our culture over time, for sure. Well, you, Matt, as you know, are one of my favorite people on planet Earth. Your wife is one of my favorite people on planet Earth, and your children are. And you've done an amazing job, not only in your professional life, but in your personal life, of having just a wonderful family. How do you balance that? I mean, I think I know the answer to that, because I've watched you over the past 15 years be such a present parent and spouse. But what's your secret? Give some advice to the listeners. Work-life balance, prioritizing.
So thank you. That's, certainly I think that's massively important, and it's, and not everyone has that opportunity, and it's not, it's not because they're, not a great parent or a great father or a great husband. It's just not everyone has that opportunity, because that, there are many Americans that are working 3 jobs and they have to, and, they can't have that work-life balance. And that's, and that's unfair. With my career path, I've been able to do that. Certainly, we've worked extremely hard at the company to kind of grow the company and, push it to be as successful as possible. But yeah, a huge priority for me is being with the family. We've got a very close family of 4 children who, we like being together, but I will say that, over the pandemic, when they saw Dad was sticking around from home, even when the pandemic might have been over, still at home, they're like, Dad, anytime you want to go back to work, that would be awesome. Including Martha, who was like, oh my God, can you just and it's actually Martha, as you know, Leslie, I was sitting around and she thought it was like, great, Matt's going back to work. And all of a sudden she looked up in the dining room and realized I was still here. She went out.
We all have that. Yeah.
She went out. She went off and got a job. She's like, I'm like, wait, you're going somewhere now? Like, wait, I'm in my sweatpants. You're going somewhere? So anyway, but I
keep you guys on your toes. We like to keep you guessing,
Yeah. And, I was raised by my dad, who was a very successful historian, wrote books and everything else. He actually, that was like, he was always the coach of my little league team.
Yeah.
Always the coach of my basketball team. He was at every play, every birthday, it was like, that was his priority. And I learned from him. That was super important.
Well, I'm so excited to see where Sharp is headed. I always have a story I forgot to mention, was that you too have been subjected to me pitching you ideas from all I had a personal trainer.
We're going to do it. I'm confident we're going to do it.
Our company was High Rise Hive. She had beehives in the top of her apartment building. And I think she was the head of maybe the Manhattan, sect of the honey making group within the five boroughs, and there was lots of infighting, lots of drama. So I did bring her in to meet you at Sharp, which is, I mean, that's the last thing you need. But you never know. You never know if there's going to be a hit around the corner. And we love the title, Busy Bees, but we just couldn't, So hopefully I won't be doing that too much to you in the future. But it was so great to see you. So great to catch up. Really, so great to hear about. Of course, we all get to see the incredible product that you create, but it's so interesting to hear the backstory and the process and learn about your journey. And so I really appreciate you coming in to talk with me today.
Thank you. My pleasure. So fun.
A huge thanks again to Matt Sharp for joining us on the interview. I hope you enjoyed our chat. And if you did enjoy the show, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Instagram at The Interview with Leslie Heaney. A new podcast is released every Wednesday. But until then, this is Leslie, and don't forget to join the interview.